discovery. The intercepted journal. Commander Zethus stood in the observation deck of the Keloran warship Eternal Vigil, watching debris drift past the reinforced viewport. The skirmish had ended 3 hours ago. Quick, brutal, and ultimately pointless. A human patrol vessel had strayed too close to disputed territory. Warning shots were exchanged. The humans retreated. Standard procedure. Nothing remarkable. Except for the data pad. It floated among the wreckage, a small rectangular device encased in what appeared to be a protective polymer shell. Her salvage officer had flagged it during the routine debris sweep. Not because it seemed important, but because it was intact. Most human technology didn't survive plasma fire well. Zethus turned the device over in her hands. The Kelorans were a tall species, their bodies covered in intricate scale patterns that shifted color with emotion and status. Right now, her scales displayed the cool blue of contemplation. She had commanded vessels for 22 cycles. She understood protocols. Personal devices were to be cataloged and returned through proper diplomatic channels. She activated it anyway. The screen flickered to life, displaying text in standard human script. Her translator overlay engaged immediately. Journal entries. Personal logs. She should have deactivated it immediately. Privacy was sacred among the Kelorans. To read another's private thoughts was considered a violation of the deepest kind. But the first line stopped her. Day 247. I think the Kelorans are beautiful, and that terrifies me. Zethus felt her scales ripple orange. Surprise. She read on. Not beautiful like a sunset or a piece of art. Beautiful like a predator is beautiful. Like watching a blade being forged. There's purpose in every movement they make, efficiency in every gesture. When Commander Zethus addressed our captain during the trade negotiations last month, I couldn't stop watching the way her scales shifted through the color spectrum. Communication beyond words. We humans talk so much, say so little. They convey entire emotional states with a single chromatic change. The journal belonged to a Captain Maya Chin, if the header information was accurate. Ship's designation, Wandering Star. Role, Scout and Diplomatic Liaison. Age 31 Earth years. Zethus moved to her private quarters, the data pad clutched in her three-fingered hand. Her chambers were sparse by human standards. Kelorans didn't accumulate possessions the way other species did. A sleeping platform. A meditation sphere. A viewport overlooking the stars. Everything necessary, nothing excessive. She sat on the platform and continued reading. Understanding through words. Day 251. We met with the Keloran delegation again. My captain thinks we're making progress. I think we're talking past each other, saying the same things in different languages and calling it diplomacy. The Kelorans value strength. We keep trying to prove ours through words, through promises of military capability and economic partnerships. But I watched Zethus during the meeting. Her scales went dark purple twice. My translator said that means frustration or disappointment. We're not showing them strength. We're showing them boasting. There's a difference. Zethus felt something shift in her chest. A recognition she hadn't expected. This human had seen what her own officers sometimes missed. The Keloran Empire didn't respect threats or promises. They respected demonstrated competence. Quiet capability. This Mayachin understood that. She scrolled further, finding entries that made her scales flush with colors she rarely displayed. Day 256. I'm lonely. There. I wrote it. Out here in the black, surrounded by my crew, and I'm lonelier than I've ever been. No one talks about this part of exploration. Everyone wants to be the brave human pushing into unknown space. No one wants to admit that sometimes you sit in your quarters and wonder if anyone back home even remembers your name. Captain's privilege means I can't share this with my crew. Can't burden them with my doubts. So I write them here in a journal that no one will ever read. Zethus set the data pad down for a moment. Her scales had shifted to a deep violet. Empathy. Understanding. She knew that loneliness. Command was isolation regardless of species. She had thousands of crew members aboard the Eternal Vigil, but there were thoughts she could share with none of them. Burdens that came with authority. This human felt it too. The journal continued, and Zethus found herself unable to stop reading. Maya wrote about everything. Her observations of alien species. Her fears about humanity's place in the galactic community. Her frustrations with bureaucratic procedures. Her wonder at nebulae and asteroid fields. Her homesickness for a planet she rarely visited. But it was the entries about the Kelorans that held Zethus's attention most firmly. Day 263. I think I understand them better now. The Kelorans don't hide emotions. They just express them differently. Humans wear masks and call it professionalism. We smile when we're angry, nod when we disagree, laugh when we're uncomfortable. The Kilorans are honest in a way we've forgotten how to be. Their scales don't lie. When Zethys is pleased, she glows amber. When she's calculating strategy, she shifts to pale green. When she's ready for conflict, deep crimson bleeds through. I envy that clarity. I wish humans could be that truthful with each other. Zethys stood, pacing her quarters. Her scales rippled through several colors. Confusion. Curiosity. Something else she couldn't name. How had this human seen so clearly? The other species they encountered often found Kiloran communication cold, mechanical. They misinterpreted the color shifts as mere decoration rather than language. But Maya-chan had watched, had learned, had understood. There was an entry dated 3 days before the skirmish. Day 278, the diplomatic mission failed. My captain is furious. The Kiloran High Command rejected our trade proposal outright. Everyone's blaming everyone else. But I keep thinking about that moment when Zethys's scales went black. Not dark purple or deep blue. Complete black. My translator had no reference for it. I looked it up later in the Xenocultural database. Black scales mean profound disappointment. Not in us but in herself. She wanted the agreement to work. She argued for it, I think. But her superiors overruled her. We're not the only ones frustrated by bureaucracy. We're not the only ones who feel powerless sometimes. Maybe that's the real common ground we should be building on. Shared frustration with systems too big to change quickly. Zethys sat down heavily. Her scales had gone black. Maya had been right. The human delegation had offered reasonable terms. Zethys had supported the agreement. But the Kiloran Council had rejected it, citing concerns about human reliability. Old prejudices disguised as policy. She had been profoundly disappointed. In herself for failing to convince them. In her superiors for their rigidity. In the system that valued tradition over adaptation. And a human captain, watching from across a negotiating table, had understood the decision. Zethys continued reading through the night cycle. Maya wrote about her crew with affection and frustration in equal measure. About her engineer who could fix anything but couldn't remember to file reports. About her medical officer who was brilliant and deeply anxious. About her pilot who made terrible jokes during tense situations as a coping mechanism. She wrote about Earth, about a sister getting married, about parents who didn't understand why she chose the stars over stability. About a relationship that ended because neither of them could handle the distance. About dreams of eventually settling on a colony world and opening a restaurant, which seemed absurd for someone who described her own cooking as adequate at best. The journal was honest in a way that made Zethys uncomfortable. Humans were supposed to be the species that conquered through determination and adaptability. The ones who looked at impossible situations and said, "Watch this." The warriors who refused to quit. But Maya-chan wrote about doubt. About fear. About nights when she questioned every decision she'd made. About the weight of responsibility and the cost of command. About pretending to be confident when she felt lost. Zethys had never considered that human strength might be built on acknowledged weakness. That admitting fear could be an act of courage. That writing down doubts might be how one moved past them. Her own species considered emotional documentation to be self-indulgent. Kilorans meditated, processed, and moved forward. They didn't dwell. They didn't record their struggles for future examination. Perhaps that was a mistake. The final entries became shorter, more urgent. Day 281, sensor malfunction. We're running diagnostics. Probably nothing. Day 282, not nothing. We've strayed into disputed territory. Trying to correct course but the navigation system is glitching. Sent out a distress signal. Day 283, Kiloran vessel appeared. Warning shots fired. We're retreating but the damage from the sensor malfunction is worse than we thought. Hull integrity compromised. I've ordered the crew to prepare for possible evacuation. If we don't make it, I hope someone finds this journal and understands that we didn't mean to cause an incident. We were just lost. Day 284. Life support is failing. I've ordered the crew into escape pods. I'm staying with the ship as long as I can, trying to keep systems online long enough for everyone to get clear. I'm scared. I don't want to die out here alone. But if this is how it ends, I'm glad I wrote everything down. At least there's a record of who I was. Not the official reports or mission logs. The real me. The one who doubted and hoped and tried anyway. If anyone reads this, know that I didn't look away. Not from the truth. Not from the universe. Not from myself. That has to count for something. Zethus was standing before she realized she'd moved. Her scales flashed urgent yellow. Command mode. She activated her communication console. Bridge. This is Commander Zethus. Scan for human life signs within a 10-parsec radius. Focus on disabled vessels or escape pods. There was a pause. Then her first officer's voice, cautious and confused. Commander, the skirmish ended hours ago. The human vessel retreated. The vessel was damaged. Scan for survivors. That's an order. Another pause. Longer this time. When her first officer spoke again, his tone carried the careful neutrality of someone questioning orders without directly challenging them. May I ask the priority classification for this search, Commander? Zethus looked down at the data pad in her hands. At words written by someone who faced death with more honesty than most beings showed in a lifetime. Humanitarian priority. We have reason to believe there are survivors in need of immediate assistance. Understood, Commander. Beginning scan now. Zethus deactivated the console and stood by the viewport, watching the stars. Her scales shifted through colors she rarely displayed. Violet empathy. Orange surprise. A flash of amber that might have been hope. And underneath it all, a steady thread of crimson. Not the crimson of aggression or combat readiness. The crimson of determination. She had read Maya Chen's private thoughts, had violated privacy protocols in a way that would disturb most Kilorans. But she had also seen something in those words. Something her own people had missed about humanity. They weren't fearless. They were afraid and did things anyway. They didn't conquer through superiority. They survived through stubborn refusal to give up. They didn't hide their weaknesses. They acknowledged them and kept moving forward. Maya Chen had written the truth, even knowing it revealed vulnerability. She had documented her doubts and her hopes with equal honesty. She had looked at herself clearly and hadn't looked away. The least Zethus could do was the same. Commander. Her first officer's voice came through the console. We've detected faint life signs. A single human in an emergency stasis pod. Approximately 8 parsecs from our current position. Uploading coordinates now. Zethus's scales blazed bright amber. Set intercept course. Maximum speed. Prepare medical bay for human physiology. Yes, Commander. As the Eternal Vigil changed course, Zethus secured the data pad carefully. She would return it to its owner. She would explain why she read it, though she suspected Maya would understand. The human who wrote those words understood the cost of curiosity, the value of truth. And perhaps if Maya survived they could have a conversation. Not as commander to captain. Not as Kiloran to human. But as two beings who carried the weight of command and the burden of loneliness in equal measure. Two beings who had learned to write their truth and not look away. The stars stretched endlessly ahead as the ship accelerated. Zethus stood at the viewport watching the distance close. Her scales settled into a pattern of determined amber streaked with cautious violet. She was going to save Maya Chen. And then, somehow she was going to bridge the gap between their species. Not through treaties or trade agreements. Through honesty. Through the kind of understanding that came from reading someone's truth and choosing not to look away. The connection. Face to face. The medical bay of the Eternal Vigil was designed for Kiloran physiology, but the emergency protocols included adaptations for most known species. The stasis pod had been brought aboard intact, its occupants' vital signs weak but stable. Zethus stood outside the containment area, watching through the transparent barrier as her medical officer worked. Maya Chen looked smaller than Zethus had imagined. Humans always seemed larger in the official records, their reputation built on stories of unlikely victories and stubborn survival. But the woman on the medical platform was slight, dark hair matted with sweat, skin pale beneath the oxygen mask. Her uniform was torn at the shoulder, revealing bandages where the medical scanner had detected fractured ribs. She's stable, the medical officer reported, his scales shifting to calm green. The stasis pod preserved her well. Minor injuries, dehydration, some radiation exposure from the damaged ship systems. Nothing we can't treat. She should wake within the hour. Zethus nodded. Keep me informed. I want to be here when she regains consciousness. The medical officer's scales flickered curious yellow for just a moment before returning to professional green. He didn't question the order, but Zethus could see the unasked questions in the way his head tilted. Commanders didn't typically maintain vigil over rescued enemy personnel. Except Maya Chen wasn't an enemy. Zethus had read her thoughts, her fears, her observations. She knew this human in ways that transcended military classifications. 43 minutes later, Maya's eyes opened. Zethus watched as confusion crossed the human's face, followed by assessment, then careful control. Even injured and disoriented, Maya was cataloging her surroundings, evaluating threats, preparing responses. A warrior's instinct, even in a diplomat's body. Their eyes met through the barrier. Zethus saw recognition flicker across Maya's expression. They had met before during the failed negotiations. Brief interactions, formal and constrained by protocol. But Maya had watched her then. Had seen the colors beneath the surface. Did she remember? The medical officer helped Maya sit up slowly. He explained in careful standard that she was aboard a Kiloran vessel, that her crew had been rescued and were safe aboard other ships, that she had been in stasis for 16 hours. Maya listened without interrupting, her dark eyes moving from the medical officer to Zethus and back again. When the medical officer finished, Maya spoke. Her voice was hoarse from disuse but steady. Thank you for the rescue. That wasn't required under the current treaties. It was required by something more fundamental than treaties, Zethus replied. The medical officer glanced between them, scales shifting uncertain yellow, then quietly excused himself. The barrier between Zethus and Maya remained active, but they were alone. Silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable but weighted with things unsaid. Zethus reached into the storage compartment at her side and withdrew the data pad. She held it up so Maya could see it clearly through the barrier. The human's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition. Understanding. Perhaps resignation. I found this in the debris field, Zethus said. I read it. All of it. Maya was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, there was no anger in her voice. I suppose I should be upset about the privacy violation. You should be. Are you going to tell me you're sorry? Zethus considered lying. Diplomacy suggested apology. But Maya had written about the value of honesty, about the human tendency to say things they didn't mean. No. I'm not sorry I read it. I'm uncertain about what it means that I did. A small smile crossed Maya's face. Painful given the injuries but genuine. That's the most honest thing anyone said to me in months. You wrote that Kilorans express truth through our scales. That we can't hide the way humans do. You also wrote that you envied that clarity. Maya's smile faded, replaced by something more thoughtful. I did. I do. She paused. What did you learn? From reading it? The question surprised Zethus. Not what did you think or how dare you or even why. Simply what did you learn? As if the violation of privacy mattered less than what understanding came from it. Zethus deactivated the barrier. It was a breach of protocol. Maya was technically a foreign military officer in custody. But protocol seemed inadequate for this conversation. She stepped into the medical area and placed the data pad on the small table beside Maya's platform. I learned that strength and fear aren't opposites. That admitting doubt can be an act of courage. That loneliness exists even in the company of thousands. Her scales shifted through colors as she spoke. Violet empathy. Amber understanding. A flash of black that came and went quickly. I learned that I'm not the only one who feels inadequate to the responsibilities I carry. Maya looked at her for a long moment, dark eyes searching Zethus's face. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. What did you expect? Zethus's scales shifted thoughtful green. The official records describe humans as aggressive, adaptable, prone to emotional decision-making. Dangerous because you're unpredictable. Valuable as allies because you refuse to accept defeat. She gestured to the data pad. But you wrote about being afraid. About doubting yourself. About loneliness and homesickness and questions you couldn't answer. Does that disappoint you? No. Zethus's scales flared bright amber. It makes you real. Every other species we encounter shows us the face they want us to see. Strength or wisdom or efficiency. But you wrote the truth even though you knew it revealed weakness. Maya shifted carefully on the medical platform, wincing at the movement. Truth is only weakness if you're afraid of it. I decided a long time ago that I'd rather be honestly flawed than pretend to be perfect. That philosophy is not common among your people. No, Maya agreed. It's not common among any people, I think. But it's necessary. At least for me. Command is lonely enough without lying to yourself about who you are. Breaking barriers. Over the next 3 days, Maya recovered in the medical bay while her crew remained aboard other Kiloran vessels undergoing similar treatment. Zethus visited daily, conversations that started as debriefings and evolved into something else entirely. Why do you write it down? Zethus asked during the second visit. Your thoughts, your doubts. Kilorans meditate. We process internally and release what doesn't serve us. Recording seems like dwelling. Maya was sitting up now, color returning to her face. Maybe it is dwelling. But it's also witnessing. If I don't write down what I really think and feel, then those thoughts just vanish. Like they never mattered. The official logs show what happened. The journal shows who I was when it happened. Both feel important. But if no one reads it, what purpose does it serve? The same purpose as meditation that no one observes. It's not about the audience. It's about the honesty. Maya paused. Though I suppose someone did read it. Zethus's scales flushed orange. Embarrassment, though she hadn't expected to feel it. I violated your privacy. You did, Maya agreed. But you also understood what you read. That's rarer than you think. Most people would have seen weakness and dismissed everything else. You saw complexity. That matters more to me than privacy. The conversation shifted to the failed negotiations, to the misunderstandings that had doomed the trade agreement. Maya explained human cultural context that the official delegation had failed to communicate. Zethus shared Keloran political dynamics that had constrained her recommendations. We were talking past each other, Maya said. Everyone was so focused on appearing strong that no one was willing to admit what they actually needed from the agreement. Admission of need is considered weakness in Keloran politics. It's considered weakness in human politics too. But it's also reality. We needed that trade route. You needed access to our mining operations. Everyone knew it, but no one would say it directly. Zethus's scales shifted contemplative green. You wrote that we value demonstrated competence over promised capability. That observation was accurate. But you also noted that your delegation kept making promises instead of demonstrating. Because we didn't know how to demonstrate without appearing aggressive. Every time we tried to show strength, it came across as posturing. Maya shook her head. Cultural translation is harder than linguistic translation. Words convert easily. Context doesn't. What would you have done differently? Maya considered the question carefully. I would have been honest. I would have said, we need this partnership because our supply lines are stretched thin and your territory offers strategic advantages we can't replicate. We can offer you mining expertise and technology you haven't developed yet. Both sides gain tangible benefits. Let's stop pretending this is charity or intimidation and negotiate for mutual necessity. Zethus felt her scales flash bright amber. Approval. That approach would have been far more effective than what your captain presented. My captain was following diplomatic protocols designed by people who've never left Earth. They don't understand that honesty can be strategy. On the third day, Zethus brought news that made her scales shift uneasy yellow. Your crew is being released. A human diplomatic vessel will arrive within 12 hours to transport everyone back to neutral space. Everyone? You're free to go with them. Or? Zethus hesitated, a rare occurrence. Her scales flickered uncertain colors. The Keloran High Command has authorized temporary diplomatic discussions. If you're willing, you could remain aboard the Eternal Vigil as a cultural liaison. Unofficial capacity. No formal authority, just conversation. Maya's expression was unreadable in the way human faces often were. But then she smiled. You want me to stay? It wasn't a question. Zethus's scales couldn't lie. Ember hope. Violet connection. Green curiosity. I think there's value in continuing our discussions. You mean you want to understand humans better? I want to understand you better. And perhaps, through that understanding, find ways to bridge gaps that formal diplomacy hasn't managed. Maya was quiet for a moment. Then she picked up the data pad from the table beside her. If I stay, can I keep writing? Documenting our conversations, my observations? Of course. Even if I write things that are critical? That point out Keloran flaws or cultural blind spots? Zethus's scales shifted determined crimson. Especially then. Honesty that serves comfort isn't honesty. It's flattery. You really did read my journal? Maya said softly. That was almost word for word from day 197. I remember everything I read. Maya stood slowly, testing her balance. The medical officer had cleared her for light activity, though she still moved carefully. She extended her hand, the human gesture of agreement. Then I'll stay. For diplomatic discussions. Unofficial capacity. No formal authority. Zethus looked at the offered hand. Kelorans didn't traditionally engage in physical greetings. But she had read about human customs, about the significance of the handshake. Trust. Agreement. Connection. She took Maya's hand. The human skin was warm, softer than Keloran scales, but the grip was firm. Certain. Thank you, Maya said. For reading my journal. For not looking away. Zethus's scales shifted through colors she rarely displayed in combination. Amber and violet and green all at once. Thank you for writing it. For showing truth even when you thought no one was watching. The proposal. 2 weeks passed. Maya moved through the eternal vigil with increasing comfort, her presence becoming familiar to the crew. Zethus assigned her quarters near the command level, a privilege that raised questions among her officers but went unchallenged. The human attended briefings, offered observations, asked questions that made everyone think harder about assumptions they'd stopped examining. Other Kiloran officers noticed changes in their commander. Zethus was more direct in her communications, less concerned with maintaining traditional hierarchical distance. She admitted uncertainty when she felt it rather than projecting constant confidence. Her scales displayed emotions more freely, the careful control she'd maintained for years loosening into something more authentic. "You're different since the human came aboard," her first officer observed during a private meeting. His scales showed curious yellow, not quite accusatory. "More? Honest?" Zethus supplied. "I was going to say unpredictable, but yes, honest works." Zethus's scales shifted amber. "Maya-chan taught me something important. That pretending to have all the answers doesn't make you a better commander. It just makes you isolated. I spent years maintaining an image of certainty because I thought that's what leadership required. But certainty without honesty is just rigidity." Her first officer considered this, scales flickering thoughtful green. "The crew notices. Some find it unsettling. Others..." He paused. "Others find it refreshing. Permission to speak freely, Commander?" "Always. You seem less burdened. Like you've remembered how to breathe." Zethus felt warmth spread through her chest. An accurate assessment. Having someone who understands the weight of command, who doesn't require the performance of constant strength. It changes things. That evening, Zethus found Maya in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. The human had her data pad with her, fingers moving across the screen as she wrote. "May I ask what you're documenting?" Zethus asked as she approached. Maya glanced up, smiling. "You. This whole strange situation where I'm technically still a foreign military officer but I've been attending your strategic briefings and eating meals with your command staff. Is it strange? Wonderfully strange. Also potentially problematic." Maya's smile faded slightly. "My superiors are going to have questions when I return. So are yours, I imagine." Zethus settled onto the observation platform beside her. "Let them question. We're building understanding. That has value beyond political convenience." "Does it?" Maya asked quietly. "I want to believe that, but I'm also realistic about how governments work. Ours and yours. Understanding between individuals doesn't automatically translate to policy changes. Then we make it translate." Maya looked at her, dark eyes searching. "How?" Before Zethus could answer, an urgent tone sounded through the ship's communication system. Her first officer's voice followed immediately. "Commander, priority alert. Unidentified vessels have entered the sector. Configuration matches the Talvek Confederation. They're on an intercept course with a human colony convoy." Zethus was moving before he finished speaking, Maya following close behind. They reached the command deck in under 2 minutes. The main display showed the tactical situation. 3 Talvek warships, significantly larger than the convoy's escorts. The colony ships were civilian vessels, carrying supplies and personnel to an outer rim settlement. "The Talvek are demanding the convoy surrender its cargo," her first officer reported. "Standard piracy pattern. If the convoy refuses, they'll attack." "Distance to intercept?" 18 minutes at maximum acceleration. Zethus's scales flashed calculating green. The Eternal Vigil was fast and well-armed, but engaging the Talvek would be a direct military action in disputed space. The Kiloran High Command had clear protocols about unauthorized engagements. "Commander," Maya said quietly beside her, "those are my people on those ships." "I know. If you intervene, it could cause a political incident. The Talvek will claim you're expanding Kiloran military operations. Your superiors will question why you engaged without authorization." "Also true. But if you don't intervene, hundreds of humans will die or be captured." Zethus looked at her. Maya's expression was carefully neutral, but her hands were clenched tight. The human was forcing herself not to beg, not to plead. Maintaining dignity even in desperation. Zethus turned to her tactical officer. "Set intercept course. Maximum speed. Prepare weapon systems." Her first officer's scales flashed surprised orange. Commander, we don't have authorization for. I'm authorizing it. Those are civilian vessels under attack by pirates. Kiloran law requires intervention when able. Kiloran law applies to Kiloran civilians, Commander. Then consider this a test of whether our laws serve justice or merely convenience. Zethus's scales shifted determined crimson. Engage. The eternal vigil leapt forward, acceleration pressing everyone against their stations. Maya gripped the railing beside Zethus, watching the tactical display as the distance closed. 14 minutes. 12. 10. The Talvik noticed their approach. 2 of the warships broke off from the convoy, moving to intercept. The third continued harassing the colony ships. They're splitting their forces, the tactical officer reported. The 2 intercepting ships are launching fighters. Counter-launch our fighters. Target their weapons systems, disable if possible. I want minimal casualties. The battle was brief and decisive. The Eternal Vigil's superior technology and well-trained crew overwhelmed the Talvik forces within 6 minutes. 1 enemy ship was disabled, the other retreated badly damaged. The third vessel fled before Zethus could even engage it. The colony convoy was safe. Zethus opened a channel to the lead colony ship. A human face appeared on the screen, older man, captain's insignia on his collar. His relief was visible. Kiloran vessel, this is Captain Rodriguez of the New Horizons. Thank you. We thought we were finished. You're safe now, Captain. Do you require assistance with repairs or medical aid? No, sir, ma'am. Commander. We're intact. Just scared. He paused. Why did you help us? Our governments aren't exactly allies. Zethus glanced at Maya, who stood silent beside her, eyes bright with unshed tears. Because it was the right thing to do. Because civilian lives matter regardless of species. Because. She hesitated, then continued. Because someone taught me that honesty and action matter more than political convenience. Rodriguez followed her gaze to Maya. Recognition crossed his face. Captain Chin? We thought you were lost in the incident 2 weeks ago. Maya stepped forward. I'm fine, Captain. The Kilorans rescued me. And they just saved you. Remember that when you make your reports. After the convoy departed safely, Zethus found herself in her quarters, scales cycling through uncertain colors. The adrenaline of combat was fading, replaced by the reality of what she'd done. She had engaged in unauthorized military action. Violated protocols. Put her career and possibly her crew at risk. The door chimed. Maya's voice came through the speaker. May I come in? Enter. Maya looked exhausted but determined. She carried her data pad as always. That was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever seen someone do. Possibly both. Your superiors are going to be furious. Undoubtedly. Maya sat down without being invited, a casual intimacy they developed over the past weeks. Why did you do it? Really? Zethus's scales shifted through colors, settling on honest amber. Because you were right. Understanding between individuals doesn't automatically translate to policy changes. But actions do. What better way to demonstrate that Kilorans and humans can work together than to save human lives at risk to Kiloran interests? You're using this as proof of concept. I'm using it as the beginning of something larger. Zethus moved to stand by the viewport. The trade negotiations failed because both sides were too afraid to be honest about their needs. Too invested in appearing strong. But what if we approached it differently? What if we built cooperation on demonstrated mutual benefit rather than negotiated promises? Maya's eyes widened with understanding. You want to propose a formal alliance. Based on what we've built here. Based on what you taught me. That honesty can be strategic. That admitting need isn't weakness. That cooperation built on truth is stronger than agreements built on posturing. The Kiloran High Command will never approve it. They might. If we present it correctly. Zethus turned to face her. You have influence with your superiors. Your family has political connections, I read that in your journal. And I have had credibility with mine before today's unauthorized engagement. You're serious about this. Completely. But I need your help. I need a human perspective, someone who understands both cultures enough to bridge them. Maya was quiet for a long moment, fingers moving absently across her data pad screen. When she looked up, her expression was determined. If we do this, we do it with complete honesty. No political maneuvering, no hidden agendas. We present the truth, that both our species benefit from cooperation, that we've proven it works on a small scale, and that we're willing to stake our careers on making it work on a larger scale. Zethus's scales blazed bright amber. Agreed. And if it fails? If both our governments reject it? Then at least we tried. At least we didn't look away from what we knew was right just because it was difficult. Maya smiled, standing and extending her hand again. You really did learn from my journal. Zethus took her hand, the gesture feeling natural now. I learned from you. The journal was just the introduction. The choice. 3 days later, Zethus stood before the Kiloran High Council via secure transmission. The council chamber was vast, ancient, designed to intimidate. 12 council members occupied elevated platforms, their scales displaying various shades of cool assessment. At the center sat High Councillor Vraith, whose scales were so dark they appeared black, a permanent sign of his advanced age and accumulated authority. Beside Zethus, transmitted from the human diplomatic vessel, Maya Chin stood in her formal uniform. The human government had been less than pleased about her extended stay aboard a Kiloran warship, but her family connections and the lives saved from the Talvek attack had bought her enough credibility to be heard. Commander Zethus, High Councillor Vraith began, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. You stand before this council to explain unauthorized military engagement, violation of non-interference protocols, and extended fraternization with foreign military personnel. These are serious charges. Zethus's scales remained steady amber. Determined honesty. I stand before this council to propose an alliance that could reshape our relationship with humanity. One built on demonstrated cooperation rather than negotiated promises. Murmurs rippled through the council. Several members' scales flickered surprised orange. Bold claim, Vraith observed. Explain. Zethus had prepared for this moment, rehearsing arguments with Maya late into the night cycles. But now, standing before the council, she abandoned the careful political language they'd crafted. Maya had taught her the value of truth. Time to practice it. I violated protocols because protocols were insufficient to the situation. I engaged the Talvek because civilian lives were at risk and I had the capability to help. I maintained extended contact with Captain Chin because in 2 weeks of honest conversation, we accomplished more mutual understanding than years of formal diplomacy achieved. Mutual understanding, another council member said, scales skeptical purple. You risked your career for conversation? I risked my career for truth, Zethus corrected. Every formal negotiation between our species has failed because both sides were more interested in appearing strong than being honest. We make promises we're not certain we can keep. Humans do the same. We waste time posturing when we could be cooperating. And you believe you found a better way? Vraith's scales were unreadable, ancient black revealing nothing. I believe Captain Chin and I have demonstrated a better way. We started with honesty. I admitted the political constraints I operate under. She admitted the resource limitations her people face. We stopped pretending we didn't need each other and started discussing how we could help each other. Maya stepped forward. High Councillor, if I may speak? Vraith gestured permission. My government sent me here to explain why I stayed aboard the Eternal Vigil instead of returning with my crew. They wanted to know if I was compromised, if I'd been coerced, if Kiloran influence had affected my judgment. Maya's voice was steady, clear. I told them the truth. Commander Zethus taught me more about Kiloran culture in 2 weeks than years of diplomatic briefings ever did. Not because she was trying to manipulate me, but because she was willing to be honest about her frustrations, her constraints, her hopes for better relations between our species. And what did you teach her in return? Vraith asked. Maya glanced at Zethus. I taught her that humans are afraid of looking weak, so we compensate with aggression and bravado. That our diplomatic protocols were designed by people who've never left Earth and don't understand the realities of interstellar politics. That we desperately need allies but we're too proud to admit it directly. That is a significant admission, Vraith observed. It's the truth. And truth is the foundation we're proposing to build on. Another council member spoke up, scales shifting thoughtful green. You propose a formal alliance based on honesty? That is your strategic framework. No, Zethus said. Honesty is the method. The strategic framework is mutual benefit demonstrated through action. We saved a human convoy from pirates. That demonstrated Kiloran military capability and willingness to protect human interests. In return, Captain Chin has provided tactical intelligence about Talvek operations that we would never have obtained through formal channels. Intelligence sharing, Vraith said slowly, already happening before any treaty is signed. Because we trust each other, Maya said simply. Because we've proven we can work together. Because we both understand that cooperation serves our interests better than continued mutual suspicion. Silence fell across the council chamber. Zethus watched scales shifting through colors. Purple skepticism. Green contemplation. Orange surprise. Yellow uncertainty. Vraid's scales remained unreadable black. Finally, the High Counselor spoke. What you propose is unprecedented. Alliance negotiations typically take years, involve multiple layers of diplomacy, require extensive treaty frameworks. And they usually fail, Zethus said quietly, because they're built on distrust disguised as careful procedure. We're proposing something different. Start with demonstrated cooperation. Build trust through action. Formalize the alliance after we've proven it works, not before. That inverts the entire diplomatic process. Yes, because the current process doesn't work. More silence. Then Vraid's scales shifted, just slightly, just briefly, to amber. Approval so subtle most wouldn't catch it. But Zethus saw it. So did Maya, judging by the slight intake of breath beside her. The council will deliberate, Vraid announced. Commander Zethus, you are suspended from active command pending our decision. Captain Shin, your government has been notified of these proceedings. Both of you will remain available for additional questioning. The transmission ended. Zethus and Maya stood alone in the communication chamber aboard the Eternal Vigil. Well, Maya said after a moment, that went better than I expected. Did it? He didn't immediately reject the proposal. For the Kiloran High Council, that's practically enthusiasm. Zethus felt her scales shift uncertain yellow. I may have just ended my career. We both may have. My superiors are already discussing whether I've been compromised by extended Kiloran contact. Maya pulled out her data pad. Which is why I documented everything. Every conversation, every cultural insight, every moment of cooperation. If they decide to crucify us politically, at least there will be a record of what we were trying to accomplish. You're still writing. Always. It's how I process. How I remember what matters. She looked up from the screen. Do you regret it? Any of it? Zethus considered the question carefully. She had violated protocols, risked her career, challenged her superiors, and proposed a radical restructuring of interspecies relations. All based on conversations with one human who wrote too honestly in a journal that was never meant to be read. No, she said finally. I regret nothing. Whatever happens next, we tried. We saw a better way and we didn't look away just because it was difficult. Maya smiled. That's going in the journal. Of course it is. They stood together by the viewport, watching stars drift past. Somewhere out there, governments were deliberating. Bureaucrats were filing reports. Politicians were calculating angles. But here, in this moment, two beings from different species had found understanding built on truth. And that, Zethus thought, had to count for something. When this is over, Maya said quietly, whether our governments approve the alliance or not, I want you to know something. What? I'm glad you read my journal. I'm glad you didn't look away. You saw me clearly, all the doubt and fear and imperfection, and you didn't diminish it. You understood it. That matters more than any treaty ever could. Zethus felt warmth spread through her chest, her scales shifting to amber and violet in combination. Understanding and connection. You showed me that honesty can be strength. That admitting uncertainty doesn't make you weak. That truth serves better than pretense. She paused. I read your words, Maya-chin. But you taught me how to live them. Maya reached out, taking Zethus's hand in hers. The gesture had become familiar, comfortable. So what do we do now? We wait. We hope. And we continue being honest, regardless of what anyone else decides. That's a terrible strategic plan. It's the only one that matters. 3 days later the decision came. Both the Kiloran High Council and the human government approved a trial cooperation agreement. Not a full alliance, not yet. But formal permission for Zethus and Maya to continue developing frameworks for mutual benefit. 6 months to demonstrate that their approach could work on a larger scale. Zethus's command was restored. Maya was officially assigned as human liaison aboard the Eternal Vigil. The political machinery of both governments would watch closely, ready to terminate the experiment at the first sign of failure. But they had a chance. A real one. 6 months, Maya said, reading the official notification on her data pad. To prove that honesty can reshape interspecies relations. No pressure, Zethus replied dryly. Maya laughed. We saved a convoy from pirates, proposed an alliance to the High Council, and got both our governments to agree to something in under a month. 6 months should be easy. You're terrible at strategic assessment. I know. That's why I write it all down. So I can look back and see where I was wrong. She paused. Or where I was right despite everything. Zethus's scales shifted warm amber as she looked at this human who had changed everything. What will you write about this? Maya was quiet for a moment, then smiled. I'll write that I found someone who read my journal and didn't look away. Who saw my truth and chose to stand beside it. Who taught me that understanding built on honesty is stronger than agreements built on pretense. She met Zethus's eyes. I'll write that I was afraid and I did it anyway. Just like you taught me strength and vulnerability aren't opposites. I taught you that? You demonstrated it. By reading my journal even though you knew you shouldn't. By admitting you weren't sorry. By risking everything for what you believed was right. Maya extended her hand one more time. Here's to 6 months of continued honesty. However it ends. Zethus took her hand, holding it firmly. However it ends. But as they stood together, looking out at the stars that stretched endlessly ahead, Zethus suspected this was only the beginning. They had stumbled into understanding through an intercepted journal and honest conversation. Now they had 6 months to prove that what worked between two individuals could work between two species. It was ambitious. Possibly impossible. Definitely dangerous. But they had something most diplomats never found. Genuine trust built on seeing each other clearly and choosing not to look away. That had to count for something. That had to be enough to start. And in her quarters that night, Maya wrote in her journal, Day 312. Today we were given permission to try changing the universe. 6 months to prove that honesty can bridge gaps that decades of diplomacy couldn't. I'm terrified. I'm hopeful. I'm exactly where I need to be. And for the first time in my career, I'm not alone in believing that truth matters more than protocol. Zethus taught me that. Or maybe I taught her. Or maybe we taught each other. It doesn't matter who started it. What matters is that we're not looking away. Far below, on both Earth and the Keloran homeworld, bureaucrats filed reports and politicians calculated angles and military advisors assessed strategic implications. But aboard the Eternal Vigil, two beings from different worlds sat together and planned a future built on the simplest and most radical foundation imaginable. Truth. And the courage not to look away from it.